Hey, what's up, YouTube? I just thought I'd make another late night video, and hopefully this one will be even shorter than the last one, which I know I say that every time and it never ends up being quite short enough. But I really am hoping this one will be pretty short. Well, what I'd like to talk about today is, well, initially I was going to continue on from what I was talking about yesterday, but this time I decided to switch gears and talk about something totally different, which is a totally different cartoon that I was somewhat obsessed with, like briefly, during a similar time, though nowhere near to the extent that I was obsessed with Rugrats. And I don't know near as much about it as I know about the Rugrats. But it's yet another cartoon that sort of makes me long for a bygone era in my life. And of course, that would be the Flintstones. Now, there really isn't a lot I remember from the 80s about cartoons, because I really have no use for the Smurfs, and I have no use for, a lot of the things that were popular during my generation in the 80s. And that's why I don't really know that many of them. I may have watched Rainbow Bright, a few years after it was popular, and I may have watched a few other things, but by and large, I didn't really watch cartoons until my little sister came along, simply because I had what was called attention deficit, and I didn't really have much of an attention span. And so I couldn't really sit for long periods of time and concentrate on a show, when I was, say, under the age of 5 for sure. I didn't really sit and watch things for very long. But then when my little sister was born, when I was 8.5, almost 9, and then she started getting into watching TV, that's when I really started to watch TV with her. Well, in the summer of '94, they came out with this live-action Flintstone movie, as I'm sure most people are aware. And that's kind of why I'm a little bit worried when I hear that they're going to make some kind of a live-action Rugrat movie, because it's like, oh Lord, what are they going to do to butcher it? So anyway, the Flintstones kind of had their popularity revived, and the thing I really like about them doing that is that it allows toy makers to introduce new toys featuring the same characters, because the old ones are kind of showing their wear, no matter how well someone may have tried to preserve them. So, during the summer of '94, it was somewhat similar to the summer of '97. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd discovered the Rugrats a few summers earlier than '97, because I feel like those sort of things, much to my parents' dismay, they sort of took my mind off of the drudgery that is life as an adolescent. The depression, the drudgery, especially for girls, because we have all these unwanted, well, in my case, unwanted physical changes kind of, thrown at us. And we care so much about making straight A's that pretty much, our scholastic life becomes pretty much all there is to really know about us during that time period. So, yeah, drawing pictures like of little cartoon children, especially children 5 and under, because it's almost like, I don't know what it is about this time of year, but it just really makes me yearn for childhood in general. And it's like, at the age of 10, I would have nights when I would just be so sad, that I just couldn't be a little child like my little sister, but I understood why. So in the summer of '94, I became obsessed with the Flintstones in a similar way that I was obsessed with the Rugrats, meaning I would draw pictures of them, and, specifically Pebbles and Bamm-Bamm. But, it just kind of got me to thinking about how that cartoon and that era of cartoons, was just from a bygone, more wholesome era. And what I mean by that is not only were the characters somewhat more realistically drawn, their body proportions and all that, which I have two little Flintstone babies, Pebbles and Bamm-Bamm, which, yes, I put a makeshift diaper panty on each one of them, made out of felt, but, they were just a bit more wholesome in many ways than, say, the Rugrats and the Klasky Supo cartoons, and certainly more than the Simpsons. I mean, that's just something totally different. Um, so, and what I mean by that is, as far as I know now, whether or not they've made any episodes since then, or, I mean, I really don't know that much about it. Like, I didn't watch too many episodes. But as far as I know, they didn't have poop jokes and they didn't, throw up on their parents, which, I'd love to make a video about Angelica throwing up on her daddy and how, I swear, if you pause it when she does that and he lifts her up, you can literally see what looks like a bulge in the seat of her tights. And while most people would just brush that off and say, oh, there's no way, I think that, in the truest sense that it can happen for a cartoon character, it actually may have come out of both ends, so to speak. So, yeah, Chucky loses his glasses, ransom of Cynthia, and then in the episode Clown Around, I mean, she literally farted at the circus, which probably a lot of people would brush that off and say, no, she didn't. Oh, but oh, yes, she did. And the way that her dad was carrying her out of there, it's like she doesn't usually ask her parents to carry her unless there's something wrong. So, yep. But as far as I know, those sort of things didn't happen with the Flintstones. And I'm not saying that's good or bad or, in between. I'm just saying that it's a different type of era, like a different set of standards. It was like, even though they're supposed to be a bit younger than some of the Rugrats, well, I think she's like less than a year old and he might be closer to 2 years old. But I mean, I'm not really sure about their ages. We'll just say they're similar in age to the Rugrats. But I just like the fact that in those days, you could tell who was the girl and who was the boy, which is very important to me. There's nothing that infuriates me like blurring the distinctions between little boys and little girls, which I know that might seem kind of odd, coming from a short-haired woman. But it just infuriates me when, I'd have to say my least favorite Rugrats characters were Phil, Lil, and Dill. Because not only did their names rhyme, and not only did they try to gross people out, that was pretty much their only purpose for being there much of the time. It just always infuriated me that all three of them were very androgynous, Like, I mean, Dill wore purple much of the time, and, Phil and Lil were so alike that you couldn't tell them apart. So they were my least favorite Rugrats because it's like you couldn't tell, if they took the bow off of Lil, which one was the girl and which one was the boy, hardly. So yeah, that's what I love about this era of cartoons when, I mean, even if they were just babies, I mean, you could tell, the girls from the boys, and for the most part, bodily functions were in the does not exist socially category, no matter how old the character was.